What if I told you the American dream is dying? Not with a bang, not on the battlefield, but quietly, through debt, inflation, broken promises, and a society tearing itself apart. The 20th century was the century of America. From the ashes of World War II to the fall of the Soviet Union, the United States was not just a country, it was the empire. But today, cracks are spreading across the foundation, and history tells us every empire rises and every empire falls. Rome, Britain, and now, maybe America. Let's begin with the illusion of strength. For decades, the United States was the engine of the world. Factories roared, highways stretched across the continent. Silicon Valley birthed the digital revolution. The world looked to America not just for products, but for culture, ideals, leadership. But behind the curtain, something darker has been happening. Jobs outsourced. Walk through Detroit, once the beating heart of American manufacturing. You'll find empty factories, crumbling neighborhoods, ghost towns of a bygone era. China steps in. The factories didn't vanish. They just moved across the Pacific. Now it's China building the world's highways, railroads, and EVs. Allies drifting. Once Washington dictated the rules. Today, countries cut deals without waiting for America's approval. Even Europe, the closest ally, is starting to whisper about independence. The world that once orbited around the U.S. is spinning on its own axis. Now, let's look at the rise of new giants. China, the second largest economy, is now the workshop of the world. Solar panels, electric cars, 5G networks. They're stamped made in China. BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, and others knocking at the door. Together, they control over half of the world's population and more than a third of its economy. The G7, the club of rich Western nations America once dominated, sits at just 28%. For decades, if you needed money, you went to Washington or the IMF. Now, countries call Beijing, loans for railroads, deals for oil, partnerships for infrastructure. The world's center of gravity is shifting east. Tariffs go up, sanctions pile on, tensions rise, but walls can't stop a tidal wave. But the cracks at home are even deeper. Empires don't collapse from the outside first. They rot from within. And that's where America's biggest enemy lies, inside its own borders. Debt spiral. The United States is the most indebted nation in human history, trillions upon trillions. Every second the clock ticks higher. The interest alone could bankrupt entire countries. Who holds the IOUs? Japan, China, and others waiting for their due. American taxpayers are in effect paying their rivals to grow stronger. And then there are the so-called zombie companies. Firms that should be dead, but survive by borrowing more just to pay off old loans. A shell game, but on a national scale. The dollar's diminished throne. Once upon a time, the dollar ruled 80% of global reserves. Today, around 40% and shrinking. The BRICS nations openly discuss alternatives. Even America's allies trade in other currencies. The dollar is still strong, yes, but it's no longer untouchable. The working class squeeze. This is the most tragic part. The American dream was built on the promise that if you worked hard, you could have a house, a family, a future. But today, millennials and Gen Z drowning in student debt. Housing so expensive, owning a home is a fantasy. Wages stagnating while prices explode. Eggs, milk, rent. The basics of life are outpacing paychecks. Unions, the shield of the working class, have been gutted. Workers are told to just hustle harder, juggling 2-3 jobs just to survive. The political circus. When people hurt, they look for answers. But Washington doesn't give answers. It gives theater. On the right, Donald Trump rode to power by saying what many felt. The system is broken. On the left, Bernie Sanders promised revolution, but his own party slammed the door shut. And in between, a Congress gridlocked, more interested in donors and sound bites than solutions. The result? A country divided, angry, turning on itself. Red versus blue, rich versus poor, urban versus rural. This isn't the image of a confident empire. It's the portrait of a nation at war with itself. And here's the most painful truth: the death of the American dream. What made America powerful wasn't just its army or its dollar. It was the story, the myth of the American dream, that immigrants could arrive with nothing and build a life. That talent and hard work were enough. That freedom and opportunity flowed endlessly. But the story is cracking. Ask young people today if they believe they'll live better than their parents. Most will say no. Ask immigrants where they'd rather build their future, and many no longer choose the U.S. For the first time in modern history, talented minds are leaving America, not coming to it. Tech workers, scientists, entrepreneurs, they're finding better opportunities abroad. And when the dream dies, the empire follows. History has warned us before. Every empire in history believed it was exceptional. Rome said it, the British said it, the Ottomans said it, and America says it now. This time is different, they claim, but history is brutal. It rhymes. Rome fell not because barbarians were stronger, but because corruption, decadence, and inequality hollowed it out from within. The British Empire collapsed not in one moment, but over decades of economic exhaustion, colonial revolts, and unsustainable debt after 2 world wars. And now America too faces the same traps: endless wars, runaway spending, and a widening gap between the elites and everyone else. History doesn't repeat exactly, but the echoes are deafening. And here's the silent crisis no one wants to admit: trust. An empire runs on belief. Belief in the dollar, belief in the government, belief in the dream. Once that belief breaks, collapse speeds up. Trust in media. Polls show less than 30% of Americans trust mainstream news. Trust in politics. Congress approval ratings sit in the teens. Trust in the system itself. More and more Americans say the system is rigged and democracy no longer represents them. Without trust, institutions crumble, and when institutions crumble, chaos follows. Think about it. What happens when Americans no longer trust the dollar, the banks, or even elections themselves? You don't need tanks on the street. You don't need foreign armies. Collapse comes quietly, like termites chewing through the beams of a house, until one day the roof caves in. Meanwhile, the global shift is already underway. If you look closely, the world is already preparing for life after American dominance. Saudi Arabia sells oil to China in yuan. India and Russia trade in rupees and rubles. African nations sign infrastructure deals with Beijing, not Washington. Step by step, transaction by transaction, the world is decoupling from America. And once a tipping point is reached, once enough countries no longer need the dollar or U.S. military protection, the empire's grip slips fast. It's like gravity. For decades, the U.S. was the sun at the center of the global solar system, but now other stars are pulling planets into their orbit. The universe is rebalancing. And what does this mean for you? This isn't just about geopolitics. It's about your wallet, your job, your future. If the dollar weakens, imports cost more. Gas, food, electronics all rise. If debt keeps ballooning, taxes rise or social programs get cut. If inflation outpaces wages, families get squeezed harder. And if America loses its grip on global finance, retirement accounts and investments tied to Wall Street could take a massive hit. For decades, Americans assumed their money was safe, their jobs were secure, and their future was guaranteed. But that guarantee is fading, and millions are waking up too late. So America now stands at a crossroads. There are 2 paths. Reinvention. The U.S. could acknowledge the decline, rebuild its manufacturing, reform its politics, invest in its people. It could create a new American dream, one that works for the 21st century. Or denial. It could keep borrowing, keep fighting, keep dividing, until one day the collapse becomes undeniable. Every empire in history reached this moment, and every empire had to choose. The truth is simple. No empire lasts forever. America is not exempt. The signs are all around us. Debt, division, decline. The question isn't if the American empire will fall, it's when. And more importantly, for you watching this right now, what will you do about it? Because here's the brutal reality. When empires decline, ordinary people pay the price first. The elites cash out. The politicians point fingers. But it's the middle class, the workers, the families, that get crushed. So ask yourself, are you prepared for a world where the U.S. is no longer the undisputed superpower? If you found this video eye-opening, don't just click away. Hit subscribe, smash the like button, and share this with someone who still believes the American dream is alive. Because the sooner we wake up, the sooner we can prepare. And in the comments, tell me this. Do you think America can reinvent itself? Or are we watching the final act of the empire? You're watching Ascend Your Mind channel, decoding money, power, and empires.